Kaitesi to join our panel. So thank you. I'll just go join them so that we can start our conversations. Thank you very much. We'll start off our conversation, and I'll start off immediately to Mr. Steven Rodriguez, who is the UNDP representative in Rwanda. UNDP is one of the partners, of course, of RGB in promoting accountability through RGS. But what motivated you? What motivated UNDP to keep supporting, the scorecard over the years?
Thank you very much, Fiona. And good morning, everyone. Let me just take a quick minute to recognize the honorable ministers here, the Lord Mayor, the ambassadors, and all the distinguished officials. It's an excellent question. And we've been there with RGB from the very beginning, with the very first scorecard. I think the reason is the way we see governance in terms of its importance to development. In development economics, they say, if you want to see how well a country will perform and how fast a country will develop, don't look to see if it has oil and gas or natural resources or its geographic location and access to markets and so on. Look first at the quality of its institutions and its governance. And the World Bank has done quite a bit of research on that, showing the correlation between good governance and development. And it's the strongest, most robust correlation. If you don't have good governance, if you don't have rule of law, if you don't have peace and security, if you don't have transparency and accountability, etc., you simply won't develop fast enough. So for us, this was an investment in governance, and UNDP is broadly invested in good governance here in Rwanda, and the RGS was just one of the many tools that we have been supporting. So we do support the RGS, but we also support the Citizens Report Card that the CEO made reference to, the Rwanda Media Barometer, the Reconciliation Barometer, the CSO Development Barometer, and it's to provide the kind of evidence and data. The CEO made such an excellent presentation. It's to give us information to look at how well the country is doing in terms of those dimensions of governance, even though the RGS goes beyond governance and looks at other sectors as well. So first, it's to give that opportunity to see how well the country is progressing in building those institutions and delivering good governance. The second thing is it creates an opportunity for people-centered development, for people to become the center of the development process. Last year, I participated in one of the CRC, and the CRC is very similar in many respects to the RGS, the Citizens Report Card of the development process. But the final quick thing, Fiona, is the RGS is also quite an important tool that helps to inform the policymaking here in Rwanda. The RGS, from the very first one, contributed to the formulation of EDPRS 1, EDPRS 2, and most recently, the National Strategy for Transformation and Vision 2050, and so on. So it provides quite a comprehensive set of data on where the country is and where it needs to go. And so for us, as I said, it was one of those investments that we thought was very important to make in this critical area of governance. And while I'm at it, and before I hand back over the mic, let me thank Swedish CEDA, because they've been a major partner to us in the UN in supporting this area of work and governance. And I want to also congratulate RGB on the launch of RGS 6 today. I spent the last couple of nights looking at the document, and it's extremely well done. It's rich, and it provides really useful information for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodriguez. Before you put your microphone down, I'll have to ask another question, definitely. In one of your recommendations, or reading your recommendations, you wrote, "Rwanda, we want." Now, as an outsider looking in, what do you think we can do better to foster the Rwanda we want?
That's a tough question. I did mention people-centered development because the Rwanda we want is not the Rwanda few of us want. It's a Rwanda that everyone within Rwanda wants. And there are a couple of data points in the report that gives us some indication of how that could be better done. Again, it's not about the policy choices that the country is making, because I think those are, for the most part, on the right track. But the CEO mentioned one or two data points, which I also saw when I was reviewing the data. One, the citizens are asking for more opportunity to participate in the local planning and budgeting. It's good at the national level, but at the local level, there is that call for more opportunity to participate. So I think that would create space for the citizens to have more of a voice in terms of deciding those priorities, especially at the local level. So whether we're talking about the imihigos, the local government plans and budgets, or whatever it is, I think that would create space for that to happen. The second area, and again, it's one of the weaker areas that the RGS points out, is the inclusivity for people with disability. Again, I think the data shows it was about 59% or something in that area. Rwanda's made considerable progress in terms of inclusion and inclusiveness and gender equality. The country is celebrated globally. But in the RGS, we saw that space for greater inclusivity for those persons with disability. And I think it's a message. And again, the CEO pointed this out, so it's not something that I discovered in the report, which they're not aware of. So what I would say is the tool itself creates that space for all citizens to be involved in defining the Rwanda they want. And it has pointed to two areas in particular, which I noticed looking at it, for greater involvement at the local level in defining that Rwanda, and for greater opportunity for people with disability to define that Rwanda they want.
Thank you very much, Rodriguez. I want to acknowledge your presence, Honorable Musoni. Thank you for making time to be with us. I'll move over to you, Dr. Issa. You're the CEO, of course, of RGB, and of course, the scorecard really goes to the heart, if I should put it that way. Quality of service delivery is one of the poor performing pillars over the years, but this time around, pillar number 5, investing in human and social development, scored the least with 68.5. I know you've gone through the indices, you've mentioned education is part of it and others, but I'm wondering then, what do we do to ensure, because also reading from the report, it states that investing in human and social development is the only pillar which consistently decreased since the first edition. What should we do before we move to, quality of service delivery? What do we do to ensure that now we are doing better in this particular pillar?
Well, thank you very much, Fiona. I think I partly mentioned on what we should do. Rwanda has deliberately chosen to pursue a knowledge-based economy. And in that pursuit, there is great emphasis on the human from not even from birth, from conception. And a lot of policy has been put in place to take care of the Rwandan even before they see Rwanda physically. How you treat or how you deal with a mother who is pregnant, and how you give children a great introduction to this country when they are born, in order to have them grow, to be treated in a way that they will have an opportunity to have their full potential. Because when we are making a discussion on stunting, we are also speaking about the fact that when there is stunting, there is a big impact of not allowing people to ever live their full potential, and therefore do the kind of contribution that there is going to be. So I think I should say that on a policy level, there is a great focus now. When you look at the policies with our ECDs and the policies that have been put in place in terms of dealing with the stunting, which comes out clearly as one of the weaker points in this particular pillar, is a key thing. The education sector, I know, has been going through a number of reforms, trying to adjust in terms of strategy, trying to adjust in terms of of improving the education environment, and the opportunity that there is a lot of, at least at the higher education level, a lot of investment in great universities that are coming into this country. But a great sense of coordination is required in that whole process to treat the born Rwandan, the non-born Rwandan, to have the opportunity to fully enjoy their lives in the knowledge-based economy. So if you ask me what should be done, I think we really want to see a great sense of coordination in implementing those policies and in giving them the right priority that they deserve. The priority of how you treat women who are pregnant, the priority of how you treat everyone. I think he mentioned on the inclusive part of education and other accesses. So I already mentioned there is a great link on service delivery and that great full potential that we all achieve when we have gone through a health lifestyle and when we have had the opportunity to have the kind of education system that we have. And the people in this room can make a difference. I think that's really why the audience of the RGS is the details that the Deputy CEO mentioned. When we do the invitation, we are conscious of what every one of you does in putting to life that particular dream. So if we all did a great job in building that Rwandan in terms of how they come to this country and how they grow up in terms of their health, but also the kind of education environment, and Rwanda has gone through a lot. I think those are some of the soft areas that we can even do better because they do not even require extremely huge investment. We can see trends. We can see that there is a lot of good trends in terms of both investment, but also in terms of policy and legal process. But the journey has to be very consistent, and it shouldn't be a slow journey because the loss here is a loss in the future. Absolutely.
But Dr. Euster, like you just mentioned, maybe I should ask you to kindly challenge, because you've mentioned the people that are in this room are, if I should say, creme de la creme of the nation today. If you were to challenge them today so that they live with the challenge, so that each and every person in this room takes upon their lead to do something, what would it be?
Well, I think the lead should be understanding what the challenge is, and that's what the governance scorecard does. The governance scorecard does put you what your picture looks like. What we have done over this year actually was to really coordinate with the institutions to give us the exact data. The education sector, I will mention particularly the education sector and the environmental sector. We went back with them and adjusted to be able to measure the things that we are supposed to be measuring. And that's a great starting point, because if you know what problem you have, the steps that you're making into fixing the problem becomes efficient. And that element of efficiency is core. I think people in this room, if you look at the universities that are here represented, if we challenge them on the relevance of the programs they are using, but also pursue the life to its fullness, I think that's the kind of challenge that we are doing. What I said also that we do, and the institutions should do, is to really do a personal assessment. The Rwanda Governance Scorecard is a nationalized self-assessment tool. Self-assessment has been proven to be effective because when you self-assess, actually, you don't go on defense. Nobody self-defends in terms of talking to yourself. So I should also recommend that there gets to be an in-depth of self-assessment. I appreciate many of the institutions because after this launch, we get invitations by institutions to try to understand exactly what we are assessing, and several times we have challenged each other on what we need to add in the assessment. And that gives the opportunity to address the real things. So for me, the challenge is we know very clearly where this country is going. The priorities at a national level are clear. They have been harmonized with our international commitments. So really nobody is struggling with the planning processes because the planning processes have been set clearly from the strategic level to the district levels. The implementation and the coordination of that process, and then the monitoring and evaluation of that process is something that is core to accountability, which is a key governance principle, And it's also core to transparency. So I would insist on the governance principles of accountability and transparency in the process of implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Issa. You know, I mentioned that because while we were outside, someone just said, you know, RGB bararega na chani. Mwamurega na chani. So for me, I had to ensure that you tell us that it's about accountability and not a matter of you pinpointing, you know, where we're not doing right. I'll go to you, Mr. Chulu. Now, Africa Peer Review Mechanism was given an extended mandate of assessing governance in Africa and monitoring implementation of the SDGs and, of course, the Africa Agenda 2063. From your view, how do you assess the Rwanda governance scorecard, really?
Thank you very much. And before I go into responding to your question, let me join my previous speakers in observing protocol and greetings from South Africa, the African Peer Review Mechanism. Coming back to your question, at the African Peer Review Mechanism, we believe that the Rwandan approach towards self-assessment is a model that we need to replicate across the continent. You mentioned we have been given an expanded mandate to assess all aspects of governance across the continent. Yes, indeed we have, but that assessment has hit a lot of, should I say, bottlenecks, in that information on governance is strictly very difficult to collect on the one hand. Secondly, when we talk governance, we have a broad range of ideas that come to mind. And Rwanda has done a favor to the global and continental community by pinpointing the critical areas of governance that we need to look at. We know institutionally the Rwanda Governance Board is an example to emulate. And its product is equally a good example to emulate. So the two combined provides us with a very clear picture of what the continent needs. If you recall, earlier this year, the African Peer Review Mechanism, in conjunction with the African Governance Architecture Platform, released a report on the state of governance in Africa. It was called the African Governance Report. I think the Economic Commission for Africa also produces a similar report, but it's on specific issues. But this African Governance Report was designed to look at 5 broad areas: constitutionalism and the rule of law, the nexus between development and governance. You look at peace and security. We looked at the regional aspects of governance and how that impacts on development and so on. But one of the recommendations in that report pointed to what Rwanda is already doing. The recommendation was that all countries should produce national governance reports. And in April this year in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, we formed a task force which was designed to look at the intricacies of how governments or how countries should, or member states should be reporting on their governance progress. Through, of course, the Agenda 2063 aspirations 3 and 4, and of course the Sustainable Development Goals. These were just guidelines, but we are still working on how to come up with a set of a toolkit that is going to help countries come up with what Rwanda is already doing. And we want to take this opportunity to use your institution as an example to the rest of the continent that can use to report on governance. We know the data is difficult, and some countries are not as forthcoming with information on governance as others are, but I think it's a very good stepping stone. So yes, governance board, yeah, and we would like to know about how you are organized so we can actually then go out there and replicate this very successful model. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Before, maybe I'll let Mr.
Because even this morning he said, I am not with you, but I'm in Kigali spiritually, but I want people to understand that this method is a self-assessment, homegrown, rigorous process. And that opportunity of
Rodriguez, comment on that before asking my question.
I don't want to...
that in process, because there are people who are in the areas of the governance assessment in different ways at different levels, both locally and internationally. And what they say about the governance scorecard actually help us to understand that irrespective of us being on the right track for what we are assessing locally, we are also on the right track in terms of trying to assess our national commitments locally and internationally. So definitely we are moving together as a continent, and we would not at all, at any level, fail to be part of this whole process. We've engaged with the APRM seriously, and we really hope that we can afford to build not just the Rwanda we want, but the Africa we want, and together.
Absolutely. Mr. Chule, before you comment on this, maybe,
Okay.
yeah, maybe you'll tie my question rather to your comment as well. So my next question would be, you've just mentioned the national governance report that you want other countries to do, but I do not want us to take things for granted, in that most people say Rwanda is a special case, which indeed Rwanda is a special country. So how do you intend to see that these African countries are accountable? Because we've seen people who do not want to give information. We've seen African nations that are not, quite easy to share information, just like the CEO has mentioned. Do you have punitive measures? What are you going to do to ensure that these countries actually emulate what Rwanda is doing?
Well, I was just going to follow up on what you said, but that's related to your question as well. Yesterday, when Dr. Kabele was making a presentation in Pretoria, I was chairing that session. And the appetite that countries showed on this very issue, on national governance reporting, was actually incredible. I gave Dr. Kabele 10 minutes to make a presentation. And I think it was the ambassador from Egypt who complained that 10 minutes was too little. We needed to know more about the Rwandan experience in reporting to its own people on various aspects of governance. Now, I think a few other countries also backed the ambassador from Egypt on that very score. So there is an appetite. And I think we should grab this opportunity. Say, okay, here's an appetite. President Kagame basically revamped the APRM. It was his efforts that made the APRM what it is today. And we see, as we progress, many countries voluntarily coming into the APRM to try and undertake these self-assessments. So right now, the membership stands close to 65 to 70% of all African countries. About 38 countries are now members of the peer review mechanism. And we're hoping that by next year, we'll probably have 4 more, bringing the number to about 40, 43, 44 countries. So Seychelles, Zimbabwe, Botswana has just become a member, Namibia has just become a member, and so on. So there's a lot of appetite in African countries trying to self-assess and tell themselves what is not going right. And to that effect, I think it's a great opportunity for us to actually leverage on what we have right now, which is the Rwandan case, and say, can we replicate this in Egypt or in Zambia or in Angola or something, so that we can actually get the very notion of the formation of the African peer review mechanism was for Africans to be able to introspect and tell themselves what was not going right in their development arena. So yes, it's an opportunity, and the appetite is there, and we are ready to take this model forward, of course, with the support of various partners. UNDP is our strategic partner, so we are ready to take this on and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Musoni. As one of the pioneers of the government reforms over the years, what is your take on the RGS when you look at it? How do you appreciate it today?
Thank you, moderator, and my sincere apologies for coming in late. I had to juggle a few things to be able to come here. The scorecard is an instrument among other architecture of accountability in Rwanda. Historically, I could say it started around 2000 when we were doing a poverty participatory assessment within the communities, and a number of developments came up that actually people knew the issues and their causes, and that they can easily, if allowed, help the whole state and nation to move forward if we are listened to. So the framework, the structure of accountability, of self-assessment, and incidentally, before I move forward, when you said that the RGB irarega, no? I think we should say RGB irirega. Kwirega buriya nicyo kintu cyiza gituma abantu batera imbere. Self-assessment is a very strong instrument that helps people to correct what is not right and move forward on it. So from those assessments and discussions, we had this public self-assessment, the national dialogue, the Umushyikirano. But at the same time, we started thinking of how the people can contribute systematically. And that's why the citizens report card came up, which is also RGB conducts every 2 years, every year. So the citizen report card gives the perception of the people talking to the service providers. We have Imhigo system, which continuously lets the institutions also assess themselves. But the governance scorecard comes in now as totally independent and scientific, that tends to tie all the others. So to answer your question, I think it's a very important instrument that we should continuously have and discuss. Actually, I would say discuss indicator by indicator. So what we say, on this indicator, what do we need to do to have it improved? To me, it's a very important instrument, and we should give it the attention. I know traditionally, when it comes up, the Prime Minister's office holds a session on it. Sometimes it goes to cabinet, sometimes it goes to the national dialogue. On the continental level, I was fortunate last year and this year. The scorecard, when we were reporting on the Charter on Governance, Democracy and Elections of AU, now I'm now talking from the Pan-African perspective, the scorecard just gave us the data we wanted. So if the scorecard can be taken all over continentally, then coming back on the governance treaties and charters and protocols, it would be quite simpler than it is now. Because on the continent, it's shameful that most of the decisions of AU, most of the protocols, most of the treaties are rarely implemented properly, and even worse, poorly reported on. And therefore, the action of accountability is important to make us move forward. Having said that one, we shall have to invest more effort into mindset change, shifting the African perspective of accounting to be accountable to the outside instead of being accountable to self, to ourselves. Analyzing the instruments for UN or human rights and so on, you find the African countries performing well on reporting. But when it comes to reporting on the AU treaties and charters and so on, very dismal. So in my view, we need to have these assessment tools very well analyzed, popularized, discussed, but for self-improvement. not for any other reason.
Absolutely. But of course, as the Pan-African Movement chairperson, Rwanda chapter, how can you use the findings in mobilizing citizens to adopt the Pan-African philosophy?
I think I've just touched on that one.
But, yeah.
The Pan-African philosophy, which centers on mainly 4 principles and values, the African dignity, unity of Africa, the integration, people-centeredness. This scorecard is an instrument that puts a mirror in our faces and says, how citizen-centered are we? Now, if we look at the social indicators that I've seen here, I think it puts us a task on the government of Rwanda and the non-government bodies, private sector, civil society, to really get together and discuss what kind of service the service we are providing to the people indicate people-centeredness or bureaucratic-centeredness. Because sometimes, again, that is a colonial legacy. That you do things to the citizens not because they have a right to it, but because you have to do it. Yeah? So it's very important. It's very important to come back. If I'm a teacher in a classroom, am I going there for pay? Or am I going there to create a society that I want to see in Africa? If I'm a doctor in a treatment room, is this my client or my boss or the person I really want to see cured and productive so that I can also get better on that one? So it's conceptually reframing our way of thinking when we are giving the services so that we say it's the Africans creating the Africans they want.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Before I continue with my questions, I want to allow the audience, if you allow me, to bring on some questions so that we can ask our panelists the questions that you have concerning the RGS. So if you have a question, please raise your hand so that we can pinpoint you. Yes, I see a gentleman on this side. Your name and who you're addressing your question to. Thank you. The microphone, please, if you can. Technology, yes, that's technology. I think we have a Sophia in the room, a robot. If the microphones are on ground, please, we'll start on this side. I see a gentleman. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm called Alphonse Muref. I come from the University of Rwanda. Maybe Sophie needs to stop. I don't think I have a question in particular, but after scanning through the scorecard, I have a few things that intrigued me, because it would be unfair to say that you, in the shortest time we had it, you have read it and you can ask a question really about it. I was very impressed to find that reconciliation, social cohesion, and unity is on the side of security, national security. And that is very key, because when we talk of security, we talk of national integrity and safety of the nation, which covers the 3 indicators, indicator 1, 2, and 3. And then you talk of national values, and that is where indicator 4 falls, reconciliation, social cohesion, and unity. But I miss national interests because I think that should also be another aspect that you would maybe in upcoming scorecards you would want to consider, and that goes on how do we protect our national interest as a part of safety and security. The reason I want to appreciate the fact that the protection of national values is included in security is that people should understand that when you attack or when you raise or when you undermine our unity, it is as of the same importance as throwing a grenade in a marketplace. So that's how important our national security should be. Another issue that intrigued me is on these global indices, where you find that there are some areas where we have been consistent in terms of being number 1 or number 2 in sub-Saharan Africa, but maybe we have improved on the global ranking or decreased on the global ranking. And I would wish to see an analysis of what those other countries have done, and probably you're doing it, because that's why I'm saying I can't make very strong statements about it, and what these other countries are not doing that we are doing that has made us overtake. When you take an example of for example, on corruption perception, we've been consistent on number 4, but we have improved from 50 to 48. But then when you look at the global law and the order report, we have been improving on sub-Saharan Africa from number 2 to number 1, but we have reduced from 32 to 40th position. So what does this mean, and what lessons can we draw from these kind of global indices? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alphonse. We'll cross over to this side. Microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Tombola. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academics of UTB. I need to commend this report. It's an excellent report. But to go straight to the comment, there are 3 comments I have on this report, maybe to consider in the next report. One is on the presentation on the trend on the pillars. When the presentation is seen, it's only on ranking 1st, 2nd, 3rd, in that way. It would be much better to have the trend for each indicator instead of pillars, and then we see how the indicators kept on maybe improving or decreasing. Then this will also inform on the policy level on what to do as strategy. Number 2 is on I can also make a kind of a recommendation as a new policy recommendation on health. When I looked at the new policy recommendations, you find that the focusing on the red, but when it comes to the health, there is something which is very red, which does not capture any new recommendation. Last is on the last pillar, which is on macroeconomic and corporate governance. My proposal for the next maybe will be to capture the state of the applying of the OECD principles in Rwanda. That will be also much better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Tombola. Yes, I see Doctor behind. His hand is raised up there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As the moderator said, I'm Dr. Joseph Murunziza. I'm the chairperson of the Rwanda Civil Society platform. One, I want to appreciate the great work that the RGB has done, because as the previous speaker said, it's always good to have self-assessment. Of course, my interest is on Pillar 3, citizen participation. And it's good that this point in time, it scored 73%. While in the 5th edition, the score was 65.3%. But when it comes in terms of citizens holding their leaders accountable, it was 59%. So it's an interesting dynamic, because when you look at the spaces that we have from the village to the national level, we have 12 spaces that for direct citizen participation. So irrespective of the fact that it's in yellow, we are doing good, but I think if we could push to green, these are the areas that scored yellow would also move up, because the citizens would be empowered, would participate meaningfully to be able to make sure that the investment in human capital goes up. So maybe the panel can be able to chip in and give us some enlightenment on that. Two, we do have, as the CEO said, they also considered other international indices and global indices. I had an opportunity to have a fellowship at Stanford, and they took us through their international indices when it comes to governance, democracy, and also of recent we had experts. I think they also met some of you. I think they were from Sweden, from an institution called Varieties of Democracy. When you look at political participation, civic liberties, they score us low. But then when you have this self-assessment, we are on the right track. We can also testify that. So how can we try to, not to merge, but why do these international bodies, for example, the Freedom House, and those other institutions that do the rankings, score Rwanda low when it comes to civic liberties, political rights, even in some cases of democracy. But then, of course, our context is different, but these values are universal. So are they using the wrong lenses? Or maybe the dynamics are different. Finally, thanks a lot, RGB, because when you look at how you gather data and verification, I've seen that some of our reports were also part and parcel of that you used. So that shows that civil society is becoming strong and pushing for accountability and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no questions right now, okay, just the last one before we come back to the panel. I know there's no female out there that has a comment, a question.
Thank you. I am by name Begumisa Safati Honest. and I come from the parliament. I'm a member of parliament. This morning, me and my colleague, Honorable Emmanuel Ndoriyabija, we are representing the Chamber of Deputies in this wonderful meeting. And I have two questions to Madame CEO, RGB, and maybe Honorable Protemusoni. But before I go to the questions, allow me to thank some of the things I have been seeing and what actually I have seen here. Number one, allow me to thank RGB for having this Rwanda launching this Rwanda governance scorecard, 6th edition. And I want everybody here to join me in congratulating the positive will, political will in Rwanda, which has manifested itself in two different institutions, so that all are improving in what they are doing. Then my question is, we have seen through these 6 editions, we have seen the organs on safety and security, they are performing, they are reading through all these editions. So what is it that they have more than another person in Rwanda? So maybe Honorable CEO can help me to know why. To me, and Dr. Honorable Protemusoni, to me I think if what I'm saying is if I'm correct, I think it's discipline. Now, if they have discipline, these organs, security organs, what can we do so that all other institutions can follow the suit? Then lastly, what we are doing is for the people in Rwanda. Now I am now thinking of centralization. What are we going to do to take this good news to the people down there at the grassroots? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member of Parliament. I'll come straight now back to my panel before we come back for the final round of questions. Dr. Easter, the CEO, you have most of the questions, and of course, Honourable Protemusoni will also have to chip in, and Mr. Rodriguez as well, and Mr. Chilu should they.
Thank you, Fiona. I want to thank the participants that gave us recommendations. We have a very good secretarial team that is taking your recommendations. As we re-engage with the next RGS, we are going to look at some of your recommendations and see really what we can take out and be able to strengthen the RGS much more. I think mostly the question that I will deal with is the one for Dr. Joseph. Now, people will remind me if I missed that bit of it. And Joseph, I wouldn't agree more that citizen participation, you know, and I should combine it actually with what Honorable Safari asked. Citizen participation is a very genuine thing. And what makes it genuine is that citizens have to believe in your systems for them to efficiently and consistently engage. So where citizens have had the opportunity to engage and have seen that their engagement is given due credit and value, actually grows. The beauty of citizen engagement is that you don't assume that they will stop demanding. So it means that you are lifting the bar by yourself. Every time we go with this, and we have done that, we have seen the experience when we are disseminating the citizen report card. At some point, people behave like, oh, but we did our best, now why didn't they put us even higher? And we say, well, you did your best in fixing what they had said last year, but they have a different demand. If you give them an early childhood development center, then they will want the nearest primary school as well. If you give them if they only had a district hospital, and you gave them a health post at the sector level, they are going to demand a health post at the cell level. Because and that is what really development means. Development means that we go beyond the basic needs and demand the things that make us citizens that can fully enjoy. So the increase of citizen participation, I think, first of all, is an indicator that we all have gone to the citizens, and when we've gone there, we've come back to reflect that what they said matters. And I think I would not agree more with what Honorable Muson mentioned. It's because there is a whole consistent framework. They will see that sense of accountability in their inteko z'abaturage. The village council, the councils that happen at the village, at the cell level, the cell councils. But also they will see it when different leaders go to their community and accept questions of accountability. Even at a greater level, they will see it every year when we do a national dialogue. And greater, they will know that at a given time, the citizens, the leaders in this country will move out of Kigali and go to retreat. If you look at what trends in the media before the national leadership retreat, is what citizens expect the leadership to talk about. Now, when citizens start telling you what they expect you to talk about, is first of all, they know what they want in terms of their development, and secondly, they can assess you in terms of how you do the process of their development. So it's the inclusion element, actually. We shouldn't be speaking about inclusion and then get surprised that somebody's given the opportunity to be included. It is an obligation to all of us to accept inclusion, because that's the method that we have accepted as Rwanda, that has at a global level and the African level, we have accepted through the 2063 agenda and the SDGs. You asked a question that is interesting on the international indices. And that's why probably we presented them without discussing them at this stage. We gave you a snapshot, and Dr. Mlef also mentioned it. We gave you a snapshot of how we are performing there. We didn't enter into the analysis, because when you enter in these international indices, there are many things you should engage with. We have, for example, engaged with the VDM. And we looked at better just at the time of at the time of the first government, even though, and it was considered democratic, even though there is a good number of Belgians on that government. So you look at it as a Rwandan government when some of the colonialists are actually sitting on that government. And at that point, their way of progress in terms of democracy in Rwanda was way higher than the level of democracy in Rwanda today. So it tells you the way they measure is a methodological thing that we have to engage with. But they said their biggest sell is that they have data over the years. What that data doesn't represent is the differences that the countries have taken in their trajectory of development. And therefore, there is a very classical method, and I'm not speaking about them only, there is a very classical method of how these methods are built in, the sources of the data and where they get them from and how they are updated, but also the picture that gets shown. At the Rwanda Governance Board, part of what we are doing now is trying to analyze these indices, see their sources. I'll tell you many of the sources, and this is what Africa should do seriously. When you look at these sources that rank all of us, the majority are funded by also the countries that make them first, that are first. I'm not challenging that those countries are not first. But when you look at it, most of the data is non-African totally, and most of the funders are non-African as well. Now that should be discussed as well, because if you are being equally assessed with the same indicators for the same reasons, and somebody is funding and is the generator of the data, and you are just subscribing to that data, That is the lack of the homegrown element of it. And that's actually for us what RGS defines. So we do an analysis and look at where are they getting their data. And some of these we have engaged, some of the sources of data are very politicized as well. So in this discussion, really, it should be very interesting to look at what are the sources of this data, what do they make as a particular priority, and what affects the performance of a particular country in this specific data. Some of the challenges are in methods, other challenges are in the sources of data, but also other challenges is particularly the reputation of that particular thing. You know, I'll just speak about the happiness report. If you look at the questions of the happiness report, and we have engaged with it a little bit, but you know, we have engaged with them to the extent that we have also challenged the translations. Why the Rwandan translation, you know, you might ask a Rwandan if they have given somebody something in a way that Americans understand it. If you ask a Rwandan if they gave somebody money because they lost somebody, or if because they were going to get married, I am sure we are one of those places where people have weddings when someone just contributed. The answer would be different from the answer you get by saying this is the classical way we ask the question. Now, part of the problem is the classical way is only representative of one side of the world. It's only representative of a particular idea and a particular way of seeing things and knowing things. And when you ask it, it lacks a bit of contextualization. So overall, I think, David, Dr. Joseph and Dr. Mlefu, it's core that we challenge ourselves, but also it's core that we challenge these methods as well. We have agreed that we are going to send VDM our written comment on how we see what they are assessing and how they are assessing it. Because when you really look at it, some of these reports, you will never change the results, except if you improve the method. And that is what Rwanda has chosen to do. We do not ignore what they do, but we know our priorities as a country, and we have to tell ourselves the truth, whether we are moving to the right direction. And I think I want to really encourage all of you to read them, try to understand them, challenge them where you want, but also pick some of the good things that come out of that. And that's what we do with the RGS. When you look at the RGS, certainly some of the things that we measure are clearly what the SDGs are having now. If you look at some of those historical reports, the adjustment to the SDGs is a challenge. The other element, I think you've seen a discussion a bit on between RDB and the report that was just issued. One of the challenges that we find, and you will see that some of our resources are these international indices, but some of these indices just change over time. Methods will change drastically, and how you see things will totally have changed even before the assessment. Some of them, it becomes even a challenge to understand the scoring process, because the scoring gets adjusted within the process. So what we have chosen internally as an institution to do, we have a whole team that assesses these reports. The additional thing that we are doing, though, is we are sending our assessment to concerned institutions, because sometimes from an internal side now, the data we give in particular offices is not very well coordinated or even updated. So sometimes we perform poorly as a country because the way we submitted the data was not efficient. Not because there isn't a recent data, but because they found a particular staff who gave them data anyhow without even considering the most recent of data in terms of that. So there is the weaknesses on both sides. And what we have done as an institution now is we do an assessment. We will send to institutions that are concerned and say, here we see you're performing poorly as a particular sector, but we think you should engage with the producers of this report on A, B, C, D, but also internally, as an institution, you should fix A, B, C, D. So as we are in an era of data, I think we really don't have a choice except looking at the data, challenging them, and bringing them on board. I think the last question that I will address, because most of the other things were comments, Honorable Begumisa asked what the security organs are doing. Well, it's a discipline you mentioned already. I think their sectors are called disciplines. That's a core element. But one other thing that I think this particular security sector is doing in Rwanda is outreach to the citizens. So part of the thing that has remained unchallenged for over the years is the confidence the citizens have in the security forces. And that's what I said. Citizen-centeredness is really a matter of citizen confidence in your methods and approaches. So there is a great confidence in the security forces, you know. I was watching just, I think, 2 days when we had a lot of rain, and a colleague of mine sent on WhatsApp a picture of a police officer by the road and saying, this level, and it's a professional group that we are in, and he said, this level of professionalism defeats me. There is so much rain, and this police officer seems to be happily doing his job even in the rain. Sometimes we don't happily do our job even in the offices, but he was happily doing his job even in the rain. So the two elements are core. First of all, taking seriously the profession, and second, by discipline, and secondly, gaining the confidence of the people. When we do assessments in the RG, in the CRC, we find a great confidence in the security forces from the people. And when you have gained that confidence, everything else becomes much, much easier, but it only stays on if you maintain the same standards of delivery. And I think it's what the security forces also do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esther. I see Honorable Fute Musoni who wants to comment.
Thank you again. I will pick from where she stopped. I think our security forces and systems do well in addition to people-centeredness because of their culture. It's a culture that springs from liberation. And the people who are going for liberation, I would say, were of a high quality of patriotism and self-sacrifice. So they were not going into liberation for good jobs or good pay and that kind of thing. So that culture of self-sacrifice for the citizens, for the people, for the nation, it's a cultural element that you see it running through. Secondly, I could say a demanding leadership. All of us know that where some of us can do something wrong and it's tolerated. But within the security services, there's no any tolerance of any poor performance. So that's also a very important aspect that we can pick into other institutions. So organizational culture and leadership enforcing accountability, I believe, are two elements that keep our forces being more friendly and then raising the confidence between them and the citizens better than other institutions we have in the country. The second point which I wanted to, again, to add on what you said, if we look at the decentralization and citizen participation, and you analyze the different indicators, you see where the citizens are participating directly, they have high scores, 91 and so on. But where there is an aspect of feedback, then you see poor performance. If you get the citizens to contribute to ideas of decision making and you go and perform, they feel happier if you come back and say, from your decisions, here is what has happened. In my analysis, I find that one lacking. It's the feedback of back to the population and say, we have decided on this one, you help us to make these decisions, this is what we expected, but here is how far we are. These are the challenges. And then you form another loop of discussion and decision making. In my analysis, I find that one lacking. The second point where we can improve is the quality of facilitators of participation. Again, looking from different indicators where people are directed into it, making their own decisions, assessments, and so on, we are scoring them nicely. But where somebody is coming to help them to understand a few things, we are performing badly. So in my view, if we can work on those two, improve on the quality of facilitation of participatory fora, which we have, but at the same time, improve on the feedback on performance to the population so that they gain the confidence and they feel part of it. The last comment I could work on is that issue of how come that Africa is ranked badly on some indicators globally. The CEO has mentioned some. But I wanted to come back to one of the reasons of initiating the RWANDA governance scorecard. We are poor in Africa on data generation. And so those who generate data may generate them with other interests. But when we generate ours, look at them and let them fit into our culture, fit into the way our thinking, it's very important. Then continuously, when they come and assess I think we have gone through the process of assessing methodologies and so on. When it is scientifically proven that these are correct data, then those other international statistical analysis bodies will start using our data. So the quality of our data is very important to raise the appeal into other fora. So that's one of the reasons of creating this scorecard, that we can get independently, scientifically generated data and evidence that we can work on. Now, once we work on those ones and we improve, people will start asking, how come these people are improving? And then we'll say, we are improving because we looked at ourselves this way. And so Africa needs to really work on that one, on data generation and knowledge generation and dissemination, discussion and so on. That way we shall not keep feeling that you are victims. If you feel you are victims and you do nothing about it, you are a perpetual victim. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chulu, do you have a comment or should we go straight?
Well, I think most of the comments have been handled very, very efficiently by my colleagues. I think we can just go on.
Thank you. So briefly, due to the interest of time, maybe 2 or 3 burning questions or comments? Yes, I see a lady. Nice. I'll start off with you, ma'am. Yes.
Thanks, Fiona. I would like to recognize the minister in the President's office. All protocols observed. My name is Hadija, and I work for the Rwandan government in the Senate. My question relates to the report shared by Yusta. Yusta, allow me to call you Yusta. First of all, congratulations. Very awesome report, well done. Good quality, concise. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to draw people's attention to page 16. And as I comment, I'm aware that there's an opportunity for my office and Yusta to engage more with RGB on this. But at the risk of getting out of the room without a lady commenting, as Fiona alluded, I just thought I should mention an issue that I thought I should bring up and let the people in the room comment on. So this is not directly to Yusta, this is to the people in the room that do work around the justice sector. It's on the rule of law, Pillar 4. And if you look at page 14, on so it's 3.1, citizens' level of satisfaction on implementation of court resolutions. So the people in the room, those in the justice sector, I'd like to draw attention to the number on data that's around 60.9. Now, this is an ongoing discussion. There is a debate that was on television, I believe, last week on the same, where there's complaints around the fact that courts do give decisions, but implementation level is low. I'd like to draw the attention of people in this room that work around this area to give us reasons why. 2 or 3, just to let us know what's happening, because yes, we do know there is work being done, but why is it ranking low? Why is implementation a problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that challenge. Deputy CEO, I see you have, and then we'll come to that hand at the back.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Allow me to compliment my CEO on what she replied to Dr. Joseph Nkurunziza on international indices. I think I have to make a bit of clarification. And yes, I do agree with Dr. Joseph that some international indices do differ with our findings, but I just wanted to throw a kind of caution to those indices, in a sense that I have gone through them as well. But if you go through them, you will find a very different methodological differences in what we are doing and what we are using and what they are using. And then some of those differences are at the core of the difference you see when you look at those indicators. For instance, if you look at the indicators at Stanford and other international think tanks, in most cases we find that the data they are using are outdated. Most of them are using data dating from 2008. And those data are primarily gotten from secondary sources. They never approach our institutions here to get accurate and up-to-date data, and which is a kind of, a concern. So if you analyze those data from 2008 to 2009, and they are not directly given from public institutions here, I have doubt they will reflect the reality. Secondly, look at the source of those data. As I said, most of them, they use thesis from academia, website, lobby groups, and etc. Why don't they dispatch teams of researchers here to get first-hand information? Because I am saying that because we are currently analyzing some around 8 international indices, and we'll be happy to share with concerned institutions and academia as well. They will look at the approach they do. So we will probably have to also have to engage some of those institutions to do the right thing and come to us and get the accurate information. But again, if you look at the indicators, some of those institutions are using as well, they also differ, and there is no way they are going to reflect what I can call the reality on the ground. For instance, they might not be doing it with bad intentions, but because they set those standards, they can't change them because they want to press Rwanda at a particular press. If you look at Mo Ibrahim, for instance, when they assess security and safety, they don't come to look at security and safety of our population here. They assess security and safety in many cases using geopolitical location of Rwanda. For instance, if there is a cross-border tension in the DRC, they will say Rwanda is insecure because it's neighbor to a country that is insecure. Do you understand that? They will say, if Burundi has political turmoil, they say Rwanda, it's very unsafe to invest in Rwanda because even if Rwanda is an island of stability, its neighbors are insecure. Then they will project a report that is negative to Rwanda. So we have to be careful when we read those indices. For instance, again, let me give another example on economic intelligence unit, for instance. Look at their sources. They also use the same approach when analyzing security and safety. They don't care, looking at the safety of, a household that is maybe in Rwamagana or in Musanze. What they care is geopolitical dynamics in the region. And that will actually jeopardize the whole matching between our findings and their findings. And then, if you look at Freedom House, because we talked about Freedom House regarding democracy, freedom of expression, and so on, look at the indicators as well, and the sub-indicators as well. So you will get a sense of why they rank as very, very low. If you rank us on number of manifestation and the protests that took place in Rwanda, we'll get 0 because we won't force our population to go to the streets. But those are the indicators, isn't it? So if you rank us using number of political parties that registered, see number of political parties, I get Rwanda will score higher than the US because in the US we know only 2 political parties. But why do we get low on that indicator? So it's questionable. So I am just trying to make us conscious of the source of the methodological approach that we use, and the methodology, the intention of the report, and again what they look at and what do we look at. We look at specific indicators that are developed here, and we compare them with those indices and international framework. But we are not under no obligation, to match, what they say and what we say. But again, our findings are not very far from those who came to get first-hand information here. Look at Garap. Look at others. If Garap dispatch a team here, they come, they collect information, they analyze. We can't get the same percentage to many indicators, and then the same percentage on all indicators. But at least we get close to their findings. So, but we can't say because this say no, this say no. So we are we are confident with our own method, and if they are confident with their own method, it's up to us to analyze and challenge the veracity of what we are saying and what they are saying. But again, we are encouraging our institutions also to look at those indices and indicators, and where data are outdated, to engage them proactively to see how that can be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Felicia, maybe briefly, so that we can wrap up. We've really run out of time. In the interest of time.
Thank you, Fiona. Just as I'd like to intervene, we don't want to monopolize the discussion from RGB because I'm Felicia Usengumukiza, Head of Research Department in the Rwanda Governance Board. I want to intervene on the question raised by Professor Tombora. Very interesting question related to the way you are doing in terms of assessing the trend. You highlighted that we are limited on pillars rather than going further with indicators and variables. As you've observed, we have more than 36 indicators and 150 variables. It will be very difficult in this small booklet to assess over time 150 variables in one document, meaning that would be really very difficult. That is why we summarize through pillars, but we are conscious because we assess each and every variable indicator annually to see the progress and performance. Another issue you raised is about economic and corporate governance pillars. Very interesting question. Now, and you recommend that maybe we may use OECD principles. I don't know which you are referring to, but The recommendation by generating or collecting data through Rwanda Governance Scorecard is to be basically to rely on locally generated data. Secondly, in a particular case of economic sector, it's very tricky because structure of our economy is totally different from advanced economies. I may give a simple example of economic growth and economic development. Advanced economy, they are put more emphasis on economic growth. While in the developing economy, we are putting more emphasis on economic development. So I don't want to confuse you with the two notions. They are interlinked, but they are quite different. When you talk of economic growth, it's about quantitative indicator, while economic development is qualitative. That is why when you observe in these particular periods, we make sure that you are in assessing in Rwanda Governance Scorecard, the two notions are interlinked. That is why you will see what we measure related to income distribution, like Gini coefficient. It's about to make sure that even if Rwanda is enjoying economic growth, with high rate in comparison with other countries, economic growth doesn't necessarily mean reduction of poverty. Doesn't mean economic development. That is why we see through Gini coefficient, concentration in terms of income distribution are being reduced by the socio-economic, social protection programs. Giringa program, whatever VUP program, those interventions are as trying to see how we can assess or address issues related to inequality in our country, at the same time enjoying economic growth, but also addressing issues related to inequality in our country. Otherwise, we can't really rely on Western approaches, because sometimes it's quite different with our system. And in the African continent, we are also recommending first of all, to rely on our local generated data, because as Disio said, or other our panelists, most of data used by international indexes are outdated, and they all may be motivated by other intervention. That is why we, and the uniqueness of Rwanda Governance Scorecard is also to involve citizen voice, because we want to make sure that everybody, each and every our actors is part of an assessment, so that we make sure that nothing is left behind in terms of inclusiveness in assessing our report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felicie. Now, as we wrap up, as we come to a conclusion or your final remarks, being a journalist that I am, I'd call upon you to give me a headline concerning what you've done to the launch of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard 6th edition. So if you are a journalist, if you were in my, in my fit, what would you say in 3 seconds? Because headlines don't go past 3 seconds. I'll start off with you, Rodriguez, as you give a remark summing up what you'd want the headlines. My colleagues out here are still out there listening. What would you want the headlines to be? I don't want to feed anyone once.
Very, very difficult. In short, the Rwanda Governance Scorecard tells us where Rwanda is now. And it also gives an idea of where Rwanda wants to be. And so it's a very powerful tool for this kind of discussion around how to get to the Rwanda that Rwandans want.
Thank you. Self-assessment that the Rwanda Governance Scorecard is an unnecessary tool to deliver governance, and governance that delivers development. Thank you.
Yeah, 3 seconds. Well, my 3 seconds are just that we should take this report out there, and I think the Honorable Member of Parliament talked about bringing the report out of rooms such as this and taking it out to the people. Thank you.
I would say that it's a good driver of better performance.
Thank you very much. I think my colleagues, you'll have to pay me a bit for helping you get a headline this evening. So a round of applause for my panelists, please. Thank you very much. I hand over back to SJ.
Thank you very much, Fiona and the panelists. Can you please join me to appreciate the panelists and the moderator? Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister and the guest of honor for today, distinguished participants, as I said earlier, we are getting close to the real thing, the actual launch of Rwanda Governance Scorecard. And I would like to take this opportunity to invite Honorable Minister and our guest of honor to lead us through this exercise. Honorable Minister.
Honorable Ministers, Honorable Mayor of the City of Kigali, Honorable Members of Parliament here present, CEO of RGB, Excellencies, members of Diplomatic Corps and international organizations, heads of government institutions here present, civil society representatives, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I'm honored and very pleased to be part of this event of the official launch of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard, 6th edition. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you gathered here today for dedicating your valuable time to attend this important event. To our partners, your presence here is a sign of your commitment to support the government of Rwanda to achieve the development agenda through accountable and transformational governance. Similarly, I wish to thank the Rwanda Governance Board for its consistent efforts to carry out this useful research, which gives the state of governance in our country. As said earlier, Rwanda Governance Scorecard is a very essential tool in fostering accountable governance. It informs our country where it is performing well, to maintain the momentum, and where it still has loopholes to be addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, the particularity of this RGS and its strength is that it is locally produced, thus produces more detailed information that is locally relevant. It is worth noting that since its inception, RGS has generated recommendations that have informed policies and has enabled different sectors to improve their respective performances. Significant improvement has been registered over the years of the RGS. For example, the rule of law pillar has improved by 17% since the first edition, and remains a typical example of the progress that has been attained. Important to mention also is that other pillars like security, political rights, and civil liberties, control of corruption, have demonstrated a commendable and steady status. On the other hand, the 6th edition has showed us that the pillar related with investing in human capital and of service delivery demand our attention and improved efforts. You can tell that these pillars are interlinked because you can't claim for a quality service delivery without quality human resource. It is therefore very important for us as government and partners to put much attention and invest more resources and efforts in areas that we have not scored to our full potential. But as government, we commit to register better results in the next RGS edition, more particularly in such areas we have not secured well. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I would like to once again thank and commend RGB for producing the quality work in the 6th edition of RGS, but also consistently producing the RGS. Congratulations. As I mentioned earlier, RGS remains a relevant tool for self-assessment as we continue to deliver on national priorities, the ST1 and Rwanda's regional and international commitments, in particular the SDGs. I would like also to salute our panelists for the constructive insights and ideas they have given during the panel discussion. Let me also thank the participants for your interventions that are very constructive. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on this note, I declare the Rwanda Governance Scorecard 6th edition officially launched. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. This marks the end of the session on RGS, but we request you that the discussion should not end here. We request you to continue engaging the book and deepen your understanding on the findings and provide feedback to RGB. We are very committed to continuous improvement for the good of our citizens. So in that regard, we will appreciate your feedback after you have read the book. We now come to the second last session of our gathering, which is according to the program that you have before you, the group photo. But there is a last one, which everyone should make sure they participate in, because it is in line with why we are gathered here. It is part of accountability. We'll end with lunch, and we are gathered here because of accountability, discussing how we should be accountable to ourselves, and lunch is part of that. So with that note, I will tell you the categories of people who will join the photo session. As the protocol team arranges where the photo will take place, I would like to mention that the photo session will include honorable ministers, minister in the present office, and honorable minister Minicaf, and the state minister in the Ministry of Justice. Then CEO of Rwanda Governance Board and Deputy CEO. Of course, the panelists, parliamentarians that are here, ambassadors and high commissioners, heads of development partner institutions, Mayor of Kigali City, heads of public agencies that are here, representatives of security organs. Then we have chair of civil society platform, chair of Rwanda Interfaith Council, or his or her representative, chair of NINGO, Network of International NGOs, representatives of political parties that are here, all youth representatives, LGBT team, and of course the MC. Thank you very much. So we can come forward for the group photo. Everyone that has been mentioned is requested to come forward for the group photo. Yes. So I forgot another category, the representatives of academia. Representatives of academia. I see some of us, some of them seated behind there. Dr. Muref. Thank you very much. I request the protocol team to direct us where we'll have our lunch. Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation.